Now available in paperback and e-readers, All About Nikki, a fabulous first season. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meets Clueless in this absolutely fabulous African-American 1990s teen sitcom. Get all 13 episodes of All About Nikki, the fabulous first season, in paperback and e-readers today. Will Hollywood have to sacrifice its streaming services in order to get its profits back up at the box office? That's the critical question I have been asking myself as related to the conundrum that Hollywood has been having as related to its overall anemic box office for the last couple of years. And it looks like to me the only way for Hollywood to get its box office back and the revenue from the box office back is by sacrificing its streaming services. Now, back in the late 20-teens and early 2020, many Hollywood studio executives thought that Netflix and other streaming services like Hulu and Crackle were making a whole lot of money from their content. And because they thought that these Netflix and Hulu and even companies like Crackle were making money off of their content, what they sought to do was basically look to create their own streaming services with their own exclusive content, and they hoped that these streaming services would be yet another revenue stream for them to profit from. Now, when it came to these streaming services like Max, or what was called then HBO Max, Disney Plus, and Paramount Plus, many of these studios thought that they were going to be able to make as much money as Netflix was making on content. However, many of the bean counters in Hollywood were not really critically thinking regarding opening up these streaming services, because while these streaming services looked like a good idea on paper, there were major problems as related to them and the business model, and this is what's led to an overall complete erosion of market share for movie studios overall. Now, when it came to movie studios, their primary source of revenue was the box office, and in 2020, they thought it was a good short-term idea to take everything to streaming because we had the pandemic going on. However, soon after the pandemic, this is where the studios began to struggle, and they began to struggle because more and more people were going out, and as more and more people were going out, their whole way of habits had changed, and their habits had changed primarily because instead of them focusing on going to the movie theaters anymore, what they were doing is basically waiting for films to come to streaming. And as people waited for films to come to streaming, what happened to the studios is that their entire revenue stream was completely upheaved, because when it came to the movie studios before the pandemic, they basically looked to make most of their money on their films at the theaters, at the box office in the opening weekend. However, after the pandemic, more and more people had less incentive to go to the movie theater. One, because the price of a movie ticket was high, and two, many times they would go to the movies and the films would not be that great because of different issues, whether it be identity politics or poor writing. Most people didn't have much incentive to go to the movies anymore, and more people looked to wait for streaming. And as they waited to go to streaming, many of the studio executives began to rue the day they came out with streaming, because while they thought they would make money on streaming in the short term, what they were doing was basically losing money in the long term, because what people were doing was basically waiting a couple of months for a film to go to streaming, then going and using that as a way to go and spend money to see the movies that they wanted. And as they saw the movies that they wanted, they would go out here and see more than one movie or more than one TV show. So what would happen is the customer would actually be able to get more for their money by going and buying a subscription to a streaming service for a month, or in some cases the streaming service would give you a month for free, and you could go out here and watch more than one movie, and that made it where, proportion to cost, the person was getting more content per dollar than they would if they went to the movies on one single movie ticket. So basically what the studios did was basically fiscally shoot themselves in the foot, because Instead of people paying to just go see one movie at one of these streaming services, what they were doing was basically waiting for the film to come to streaming. And when they waited for the film to come to streaming, they would go out here and watch more than one movie or more than one TV show. And by doing that, they were basically getting more for their entertainment dollar than they would if they went out here and spent money on a movie ticket. And sadly, this is the thing that flew over the heads of those Hollywood executives who were so caught up in their greed regarding streaming, because in their eyes, they thought they were going to make billions of dollars like Netflix did, but they really didn't look at the big picture of entertainment as related to the business model. No, when it came to the business model of entertainment, Netflix was making money, and it was making money on two revenue streams. One, it was making money on a revenue stream from the content that was put on their platform from subscribers, and two, they were making money from original content. However, they were also paying the studios for their content, so the studios were basically benefiting from having Netflix go out here and buy their content. But when they went out here to create infrastructure to create their own streaming services, they were actually taking on the cost of one, creating the streaming service and advertising the streaming service, two, taking on the cost of maintaining the streaming service, and three, paying for the content on the streaming service. So the studio in and of itself was taking on huge losses as related to streaming, but they didn't really care because they thought this venture capitalist money was going to continue coming in. However, once the venture capitalists saw that there was no profit in streaming, which is what I saw from the beginning, that there was no profit from streaming, because basically what makes streaming profitable is the fact that it's mostly older content, and older content that's being sold to the streamer, and the streamer basically makes money by either, like Tubi, selling advertising on the platform, or like Netflix, going out here and having people pay subscriptions for the platform. That's the reason why they make money. However, when the studios like Disney and Paramount Global and Warner Brothers tried to make their own streaming services, they wound up losing money. And they wound up losing money because, one, they were paying for the servers, two, they were paying for the content that was brand new, and three, they were paying out through the nose as related to maintaining these services. And even worse, when they created these streaming services, they wound up encroaching on many of their revenue streams, such as home video, such as DVDs and Blu-rays, and they also wound up encroaching, even worse, on the theatrical box office, and that is what made the studios lose a lot of profits on their movies in the short and the long term, because as the audience starts to basically believe that streaming is here forever, what they're going to do is basically change their habits, and they've changed their habits since the pandemic. And what most people do these days is they wait for a film to come to streaming, and because they wait for a film to come to streaming, this basically makes it where it's impossible for a film to get any sort of traction at the theaters where the studios make most of their money, because whenever a studio makes a movie, what they look to do is recoup most of their production and advertising costs in the opening weekend at the theaters. But what disincentivizes people from going to see that movie at opening weekend is the fact that they know that the film will come to streaming, and if the film is a box office failure, they know that the film will come to streaming sooner rather than later. So a lot of people, what they're doing is waiting for these films to fail at the box office so that they can go and watch it on streaming about a month later, and watch it on streaming about a month later, where they can watch it at home and their whole family can watch the film at home for the price of one movie ticket on streaming services like Max, or streaming platforms like Disney Plus or Paramount Plus. Or if they get an email and an offer to watch one of these films for free, they can go out here and watch a film for free. And also watch a whole lot of other content on that streaming service. And basically, it's similar to what happens like back in the day where a guy would go out here and pay money to go to see one movie, then go into other theaters to go watch the other movies. I mean, that's what people used to do in the 70s and the 80s. You would go into the movie theater, pay for a ticket to go see one movie, then go and sneak into the other theaters to watch the other 2 or 3 movies, and the entire day you get to watch all of the movies for basically the price of one ticket. And that's what's happening now with streaming right now. The Hollywood studios are basically giving their business away for free, and sadly many executives in their greed and caught up in their feelings about streaming and speculating about streaming can't see how they've basically given the entire business away as related to their revenue overall, because streaming basically makes it where you lose on both ends. You lose because people don't go to the theater unless it's a big movie like one of these MCU movies, or one of these movies out here like one of these big movies like Beetlejuice. People don't go to the theater at all like they used to because they have no incentive to, and they have more of an incentive because they're going to get more entertainment value per dollar if they wait for streaming. And that's possibly why Hollywood may have to be forced to make a painful sacrifice in order to save its ability to make money, because the main way Hollywood makes its money is through revenue as related to the box office. This is how Hollywood makes most of its money, and I believe that they're going to be forced to go out here and sacrifice streaming in order to be able to save their box office. So when I look at the big picture as related to streaming, it wasn't the big thing that many Hollywood executives speculated it to be. No, it was just another encroachment on their business, similar to what happened when they forced TV to go digital in 2009, which did devastating damage to television. I mean, in 2009, networks thought they were going to get bigger audiences when they went out here and looked to end analog signals and replace them with digital signals. However, that decision basically drove more of the audience over to the internet, and as it drove more people over to the internet and platforms like YouTube, this basically led to as we see it right now, the demise of television, which has lost 50% of its audience over the last decade. And Hollywood basically, with the move to streaming, basically not only lost a lot of its audience at the theater, it also wound up losing a lot of its revenue, and now many of these studios are struggling to make money. So I'm thinking, as related to the big picture, Hollywood may be forced to sacrifice streaming, because streaming is basically giving away the business, and giving away the business for a tertiary or a fourth revenue stream that basically isn't bringing the money in the way box office did at the theater. So the studios may be forced to sacrifice their streaming services in order to go out here and continue doing business at the theater. That's possibly the only way that they can go at this point, because streaming is eating up a lot of their revenue, when you're having films that cost $200 million and $100 million losing money at the theater, when you need that money in order to be able to maintain your operations. And again, when it comes to the theater, this is the first way that studios make their money. They make their money on first-run content at the theater, and theaters are a big chunk of their money. And people, again, with the streaming service, are getting more for their money than they would at the theater. So this is where Hollywood is at a crossroads as related to its business. Do they swallow their pride and admit that streaming was a disaster that just did not work out for them? Or do they continue to go on with these streaming services that are costing them money in both the short and long term? That's the critical question I have to ask regarding these Hollywood right now, because as I look at it right now, Hollywood is going to have to sacrifice its streaming services if it hopes to get its box office back on track, because if as long as their people have the option of streaming, what they're going to do is go out here and have no reason to go to the theater unless it's one of the bigger movies of the year, like Deadpool and Wolverine. And again, you basically cannot put your whole box office on these kind of movies because most of the money that's made is on small budget films, and you need small budget films that have theatrical runs if you hope to maintain keeping revenue going for your platform, for your studio. So when I look at the big picture, I see it as, streaming being this colossal mistake they made in 2020. And what Hollywood is going to have to do is go out here and shut down places like Disney Plus and places like Paramount Plus and places like these other streaming services, and basically look to sell content to platforms like Tubi and platforms like Netflix. That's the way they can make their money, because with those revenue streams, you have a way to, again, be able to make your money at the studio. Moreover, you have a way to create a timeline that de-incentivizes people from looking to sit there and wait for streaming, because if people have to do like we did back in the days of VHS, where you had to wait 6 months to a year for a film to come to home video, or wait for it to come to one of the cable channels, then that gives people incentive to go to the theater and spend money to go see these movies. That is the thing that gives people incentive to go see a movie, is knowing that, hey, if I miss this movie, I have this fear of missing out because this film is going to be 6 months to a year before I can go see it on home video or I can see it on streaming. That's the way it used to work as related to films, and this is what got people to get up and go to the theater. It gave people a motivation to go to the theater, knowing that they had to go to that theater or miss out on this movie. And the whole thing is that's the only way you can get people to go. Now, some people will say, oh, this will make it where the bootleggers will come in. But the whole thing is, why would you want to risk on a bootleg and get, again, a virus on your computer or your cell phone? The whole thing is that the studios can't sustain this business model for much longer, because streaming ain't really making the money the way that these films made money at the theater. And the way the studios, again, make most of their money is opening weekend at the theater. So when I look at the big picture, I'm thinking of streaming being a major liability at this point for a lot of these studios to have these streaming services. If anything, what they need to do is start looking to stop having their streaming services, go out here and put on their movies, and look to make deals with the other people like Netflix and Tubi to sell their theatrical movies to them first, and then possibly take it over to the streaming service. Otherwise, you're making a business where basically people are coming over and getting to see more than one movie for free. And again, that's not really, when you're having $14.99 for a service, you're basically giving people 4 and 5 movies for the price of a movie ticket, and you could be making that money by doing things very differently. And again, the thing that I think the studios need to do is sacrifice their streaming services and let other professionals do this, and let other people like Netflix and Tubi go out here and get that money on the front end, so they can continue making money on the back end, because streaming as it's working right now isn't really working out for the studios like they expected. Now, if you want to check out some of my action-packed fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find the books of the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my black vampire novel, Eternal Night, and my sorority novel, The Thetas, and A Recipe for Success. You can find all these books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos about the entertainment industry, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle, All About Marilyn. Learn all about the struggles of a faded former teen sitcom star in this absolutely fabulous 5-star screenplay. Get All About Marilyn in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.